everyone, and welcome to the 5-Beer Plan. I'm Brian, and this is the ongoing saga of an Everyman's Ale Trail. In this episode, we have a final session of Summer Beer School. I flip the switch on the next homebrew project, finish up my interview with Nicholas from Charlie Foxtrot, and review a barrel-aged sour from Mothfire Brewing. But before we get this party started, here is this episode's burning question. What is your favorite barrel type used for aging beer? Think about it for a moment. I will be honest, I am not really sure what I think is my favorite. I have had the pleasure of enjoying beers aged in rum, tequila, gin, bourbon, and whiskey barrels. Depending on the style of beer that is aged, it can give you some really wonderful layers of flavor. Looking back at my untapped check-ins, a majority of my favorite barrel-aged beers are bourbon. And diving further in, a number of those are from the Dragon's Milk series that New Holland Brewing in Holland, Michigan put out. But I've also had an amazing gin barrel-aged mead from Garage East Meadery, a peach wine barrel-aged Rogan beer from Chapman's Brewing, a rye barrel-aged Imperial Stout from Rheingeist, and my 2,500th check-in was from North Coast Brewing, a bourbon barrel-aged Old Rasputin 21. I look forward to hearing what you think. All right, my beer-centric students, it's time for the final session of Yeast Feast. Welcome to Yeast 101. In order for us to move forward with this new segment, it is necessary for me to continue to lay the groundwork. Please keep in mind that I am learning right alongside you. As I have mentioned before, there are 4 basic ingredients for making beer: malt, hops, water, and yeast. Without these ingredients, we would not be able to fully enjoy beer as we know it. I know learning about yeast has been a bit of a crazy strain over the summer, but we are finally at the end. Or are we? When I first started down the path of homebrewing, I knew there was so-called brewer's yeast because I have used that when making bread. I just assumed that was all there was to it. But I was so wrong. So in beer and brewing, there are 2 main types of yeast that are typically used: ale yeast and lager yeast. So what is the difference? Well, for starters, that's an inside joke that will make sense in a future episode. Ale yeast, also known as Saccharomyces cerevisiae, is what is known as a top fermenting yeast. As the name suggests, this yeast ferments at the top of your vessel. It also prefers warmer temperatures. There are some ale yeasts, such as kveik, that will ferment in temperatures as high as 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Ale yeast also does its work in pretty fast fashion, finishing in a few days. The aforementioned kveik yeast is a very aggressive yeast on steroids and is very fun to watch do its work. Not to be left behind, though it is a slowpoke, lager yeast, also known as Saccharomyces pastoranums, is a bottom fermenting yeast. And yes, it ferments at the bottom of the vessel. Interestingly, it is a hybrid of 2 closely related yeast species, Saccharomyces cerevisiae and Saccharomyces bayanus. The final flavor of the beer really depends on the type of yeast and the fermentation temperature. Lager yeast ferments at much cooler temperatures than ale yeast, usually somewhere between 42 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. At this lower temperature, slower fermentation occurs as well and can take weeks to complete. Low and slow, just like when you do some good old-fashioned barbecue. Oof, now I'm hungry for some smoked meat. As I said earlier, I thought all yeasts were created equal. Negative, Ghost Rider. There is somewhere in the area of 200 commercially available ale yeasts and over 80 commercially available lager yeasts. Talk about having choices. Additionally, there are such things as wild yeast strains as well. The most notable of all is good old Brettanomyces, which gives us some great funky fresh flavors in wild ales. Since they are unrestrained and hard to control, using wild yeast can provide some surprising results. Through their extensive research, BeerMaverick.com has documented over 400 strains of commercial yeast. They have a very nice database online if you want to learn more. Okay, so I'll be honest. I'm not sure where we're going next with Yeast Feast, but I want to thank you for tuning in to these introductory sessions of Yeast 101. In this segment of Homebrew Hijinks, it's time to mash in the Northern Border Porter. As mentioned in the previous episode, brewing a porter would be a first for the everyman. Admittedly, I figured this was going to be a piece of cake. Once I found a source for my grain, I got it milled and ready for brew day. This would take about 3 pounds of grain overall, with Maris Otter comprising about 65% of the grain bill. A total of 20% combined from newcomers dark crystal malt, black patent malt, and some American chocolate malt would be added to give a bit of that dark, roasty backbone that we would need for the beer. The remainder would be Munich, and then some flaked barley for some body. I prepared my stock pot for the mash, heating 1 gallon of water up to a strike temperature of 168 degrees Fahrenheit. While the water was warming, I combined all of my grain in my brew bag, along with 1 ounce of rice hulls to prevent any kind of clumping of the grain during the mash. I mixed it well with my hand to make sure that the rice hulls were well distributed. I used my instant read thermometer to check the strike water periodically to make sure I hit my numbers. Once that happened, I placed my brew bag in the pot and stirred the grain well with a large slotted spoon to make sure it was all in contact with the water. I then took another temperature reading to see where the temperature ended up. It was a little low at 148 degrees Fahrenheit, but since I keep the stock pot warm in the oven, I was able to bump this up gradually to my desired temperature of 154 degrees Fahrenheit. The grain would steep for 45 minutes. And this is one of my favorite parts of brewing, when the house starts filling with a pleasant aroma of warming grain. Notably, a more robust, roasty profile was evident this time around. Next time, I will boil the wort. Now, it's time for Barstool Banter. This episode, it's time to offer a final salute in my interview with Nicholas York from Charlie Foxtrot Brewing in Port Charlotte, Florida. We talk about what they do to engage with the veteran community through philanthropy and events, find out what beer styles he does and does not like, and of course finish it out with my favorite question. As an aside, this interview was recorded a few months back. Thus, the devastation of Hurricanes Helene and Milton to the Gulf Coast of Florida was not even on the radar. I did reach out to Nicholas following Milton just to check in. All was good with him and Charlie Foxtrot, but as you all know, not everyone was nearly as fortunate. So if you have not already, be sure to support organizations that will directly help out those affected by these powerful weather phenomena, and of course, if you know of a craft brewery that was affected, please support them if you're able. This season, I've really been trying hard to find diversity in the industry. And, I know you aren't really brewing yet, but I can't think of a better segment of the population that you're going to focus on other than veterans. You're one of those forgotten members of society, even though you've given all, in some cases, for freedoms we enjoy here in the U.S. What sort of events, fundraisers, or even organization do you partner with on behalf of veterans?
Yeah, so far we have done things for the Sons of Valor in Clearwater and the 22 Project out in Delray, Florida. Some of the things we've done so far for that is we've done a yoga class in the morning that was donation based and all donations go to them. So yoga, though, is called Warriors at Ease. It is a program designed for the instructors to work with people who have PTSD and how to work around that. So it is all veteran focused on that. Although we've had a lot of non-veterans come in for those classes so far, but we're just kind of getting it started and really trying to push it and create the awareness of that opportunity. And then later, once we open our doors, we've done $1 of every draft sold goes to that organization that day. We currently have merchandise with a red logo on it that 22% of the profits from there get donated to the 22 project. We are going to be creating a lager for the 22 project that will have, again, percentage of sales donated to them strictly from that beer. We're going to do the same thing for the Sons of Valor. And we're always looking to partner with other organizations in the area. We have a couple that are more local that we've been trying to partner with and see what we can do for that. This year for Veterans Day, it's our first Veterans Day open, but we're trying to do something big for it. We have walls or portion of the wall, I guess. That's a chalkboard for each of the different branches. And those are our pay it forward walls. Kind of got that idea from Zach over at Ramshackle, but being from the military, I wanted to do it a little bit more detailed and structured, I guess you could say. So we did the chalkboards, and people are able to buy a beer for anyone, but it seems to be most common that someone buys a beer for a veteran in that branch, whether it be a specific veteran or, hey, just an Army vet or just a Marine Corps vet. So that's one of the things that we've do on an everyday basis is sell those. And all someone has to do is come in and be like, hey, I'm an Army vet. I'd like to claim one of those beers, and they can get up a beer for free.
That's awesome. Yeah, that was another thing I wanted to ask about, because I thought that was a super idea that you had there. We even bought, in honor of my father-in-law and his brother-in-law, we had bought a couple beers for any veteran for the Army. That was kind of a cool feeling to know that we're paying it forward to somebody who will probably appreciate it and enjoy his time there or her time there at the tap room. Can you tell me, what is your favorite style of beer?
I've really kind of grown into the hazy IPAs. Although coming from spending so much time in Germany, I guess, Hefeweizen is going to take it. It just was so good. And life in Germany just kind of feels more like a Hefeweizen.
Yeah. So do you get into just the regular hazies, or do you get into like the double and triple hazy IPAs?
I've tried a couple of double triples. The favorite one that I had been drinking was Juicifier from New Belgium. It was like 9.5%. Can it get you into some trouble though? It goes down so smooth. I think that one's a double. We've had a couple of local Florida-based breweries, like Three Sons. They have one called Dopalicious and one that's called Triplicious. They're both, one's is a standard hazy, and then the Triplicious is a triple hazy, and that thing was fantastic.
That sounds great. I love a good hazy IPA, especially when it gets into that real juicy, citrusy, drippy kind of. I just love that kind of profile.
Yeah.
I just can't get enough of that. And I keep telling myself, okay, I'm not an IPA guy. But when it comes back to it, it's like, I just love the flavor.
Yeah.
I love the various hop profile you can get. I love the various tropical notes you can get. I mean, from the passion fruit and the guavas to the lemon, the lime, to the Truon citrus, the oranges, the tangerine. I mean, there's just such a wide range of flavors, and especially I'm sure there in Florida, it's great to have that on a hot summer day.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I would say hazy IPAs have probably been one of our best sellers.
Okay. Well, I don't know whether you guys can get anything from Virginia, but have you ever heard of Adroit Theory?
Adroit Theory? I have not. No.
They make probably some of the best double and triple IPAs that I've ever had. Same with Gabe Fletcher up in Anchorage at Anchorage Brewing. He makes some killer double and triple IPAs. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
If it works out when I get down there again, I'll try to bring you some stuff from them, because I think you'd really dig that. What would be your least favorite style of beer then?
That one's kind of a toss-up because for the longest time it was sours, but since we opened, really had started to enjoy them as long as there wasn't like the mouth puckering sour. But overall, I honestly I'm really not a fan of milk stouts.
Okay.
Like even yeah, because sours I can still even when I didn't really like them, I could find something. I just milk stout just don't cut it for me. They just I don't know what it's just too almost too light for a dark beer, but the lactose in it makes it kind of taste odd. And so I mean even some of like the imperial stouts that have some of the that lactose in there aren't really the best flavors, but definitely a milk stout. So I just can't do milk stouts.
Yeah, and they can get a little bit sweet too, which I struggle with the whole sweetness and beer thing.
Yeah.
There is a certain line of where I'm like, okay, this is just way too sweet. I usually get like a flight of beer, and if I see something on the tap list that's an imperial pastry stout or something like that, I'm like, okay, I can probably do 3 or 4 ounces of that, but I certainly couldn't do a full pint of that because it's just going to be
Oh
way too
yeah.
much.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we brought in two different barrel aged imperial stouts, and one was a red velvet imperial stout that was barrel aged for like 2 or 3 years. And that was super sweet, but so delicious. I mean, it was 17.5% alcohol though. So that thing was
Oh,
basically like a wine. And then right now we have a, another barrel aged that's got like toasted coconut and shredded coconut, vanilla bean, espresso. And it is suckers 12%. And it's very, very sweet.
okay.
And so it's one of those things that in my mind, like before we opened Imperial Stout, to me, it just was like a really heavy, like alcohol content stout. But I feel like every Imperial Stout that we've brought in has been on the sweet side. And it's something that I've kind of learned more of since we've opened.
Now I really enjoy like Russian Imperial Stouts. They have that high ABV and that nice, roasty flavor. And
Mm,
you can add a lot of nice adjuncts to it as well. But I don't find that particular style plays into the whole cloying sweetness that you get with some
yeah.
of the barrel aged Imperials like you're talking about. But boy, red velvet cake, that's like one of my favorite things. So that sounds really amazing. Who was that by, if you remember?
That was should have been Artisan Ales.
Oh, yeah, okay.
They do one, I believe it was like every year they do a different one that they release, and this one happened to be their red velvet cake version.
Man, that just sounds great. And you said it was 17%.
Yeah, yeah. It was definitely like a dessert wine.
Yeah, yeah, that's fun. Are there any beers out there that you've always wanted to try?
I've wanted to try the Utopias from
Mm,
Sam Adams just because that's such a almost prestigious kind of thing nowadays, limited releases, but just never really dove into wanting to spend that much money on a classic
yeah.
world beer. Rather buy a 35-year Scotch. Um,
The truth comes out.
yeah, but yeah, those probably one of the utopias.
Okay.
Because I mean, I've had a lot of different beers and different styles. I mean, I definitely did not keep up with my Untapped when I was in Germany, but I mean, I have beers from Tanzania, beers from Iceland, all over. So, or I'd say one of the things that I did miss when I was in Germany was getting to one of the actual monasteries. There was one that was probably about an hour or so away from where I was at that every year did a limited release of their Trappist beer,
Hmm.
but you had to get on the waiting list like 2 or 3 years in advance. So,
Yeah, I've always wanted to make it back over to Europe and try to find my way to a Trappist brewery or even like, I mean, there's so many good Belgian breweries too. I love a
yeah.
good Belgian, red, good style
Hmm.
too. It's a little bit probably maybe a little bit more sour than you would like, but I love a good Belgian beer too. But
Yeah.
anyway, so you mentioned a 35-year-old Scotch. Are there any craft distilleries in the area that you like to go to?
We have Alligator Bay rum distillery. They were in Ponta Gorda, but they just moved down to Bonita Springs. And then there's Wicked Dolphin down in Cape Coral. They do some pretty good stuff. And then if you're willing to go north, or if you're coming south, up in St. Augustine, there's the St. Augustine Distillery, and they have a fantastic bourbon.
I've never really gotten into hard liquor much at all. I do like to have a nice little scotch once in a while, or some bourbon, or even, a nice gin and tonic. But again, if I can find something that's craft, I'd be more likely to try that than just like go, buy something off the shelf that, is
Right.
mass produced. That's just the way my brain works.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. And I mean, yeah, the St. Augustine bourbon, I mean, you could get like a Buffalo Trace for half the price, or like a Maker's Mark, but their stuff was just so good. And they have a really good premix for old fashions. So just throw some ice and do the little mix, and it goes really well together.
Thanks. I know it's a little diversion away from the conversation, but I'm always curious because those that live in states, they know where the spots are. So how long have you lived in Florida?
I've been here for 7 years now. So when I got out of the Army in 17, where I moved. Wasn't my first choice, to be honest with you, but it's where my now wife lives. So that's where I ended up. And
Okay.
I've enjoyed it so far. It's grown on me. And like I mentioned earlier, I was medically discharged from the Army, and that was due to my back. So the colder temperatures do not do well for my back. So the warmer climate here has really kind of helped.
Sure, I can imagine. And for those that are listening, I don't do the video, but Nicholas is wearing a Detroit Lions shirt. Knew that he was from Michigan, or at least supported the Michigan sporting world. So that's pretty cool to have that connection there. Do you have any kind of events coming up?
I mean, yeah, we're doing our first annual Foxtoberfest.
Nice.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing. I mean, and then we just started a couple weeks ago, trivia on Monday nights, and we do a dart league on Wednesday nights. So we run euchre Wednesday nights as well.
Do you find that a majority of the people that are coming in to enjoy beer there at your tap room, are they veterans, or is it mainly just folks in the community, or is it just a good mixture of the two?
It's a solid mixture. I mean, there's like over 50,000 veterans in the county, so it's a good chance that you're gonna have a good portion of veterans come in. And a lot of things, though, that with that number is a lot of those are older veterans. So for the most part, they're still stuck in their ways of the Coors and the Bud and cheap liquor drinks at the VFWs and the Legions. But we do have a good amount of the younger veterans come in, and really a lot of just local support because of the veteran aspect and because they like craft beer, and there's really nothing like this in the area. So
Do you find that it's mainly like not the older generation of veterans, but maybe the 30 to 50 age range that's in there more often than the, let's say, 20 to 30 range?
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now on our Untapped, like our median age is 58.
Okay.
So at least people who utilize the app and check in and stuff. But we definitely have a lot more of like the working class age group, not too much the younger crowd. I've only seen a handful of IDs of like 22 to 25-year-olds.
hmm It seems like a trend kind of in the craft industry anyway at the moment, is that a lot of the younger folks are really going after beverages that are lighter, like your seltzers and the
Yeah.
non-alcoholic stuff like that. So it makes sense. I just was curious as to whether you were seeing the same kind of trend at your location as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we have cider and seltzers, wine. So I have a group of plumbers, and they're like their significant others that come in, and they're all sub 30, and they typically drink the IPAs, the sours, seltzers, and the ciders, and some like the more fruitier, like we have a cream ale or a blueberry wheat beer every now and then. That's kind of what they tend to go for.
As we get kind of close to wrapping up here, I have one last fun question that I ask everybody. If you were a beer, what style would you be and why?
I'm going to have to go with a black lager. It's one of those interesting flavor profiles and styles. I mean, it drinks really light, but still has a little bit of that darky, roasty kind of taste to it. And just kind of matches my time in the service, I guess. And as the joke would go, the soul is dark, but the humor is light. I definitely feel like that. I mean, it's something that you could drink a lot of. It's easy going, but still has that darker side to it that can be refreshing in doses. But yeah, probably a black lager.
All right. Well, that's not something that anyone has ever given as their style of choice. So I like that. That's very unique.
That's
so
good. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, Nicholas, I really appreciate you being on the show with me here today. For those that are listening, if you find yourself in the greater Port Charlotte area, be sure to stop in to Charlie Foxtrot Brewing and support this veteran-owned business that's doing some great things in the community and has some great plans moving forward. Nicholas, I wish you the best of luck with Taproom, with the brewing process, hopefully ahead here. Thank you again for your service, not only to our country, but also to the community there as well. And look forward to sitting down and having a beer with you next year.
Well, sounds good. I appreciate Brian. Thanks for having me on the show and getting the word out there about us. It means a lot.
Absolutely. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Last call.
It's nearly time to wrap things up, but first, one more for the road. This episode, I'm drinking barrel-aged Osborne Mist from Mothfire Brewing. From the brewer, pineapple, jalapeno, ginger, and lime zest aged in Mammoth distilling gin barrels. Whew, this one's going to be a good one. Without further delay, this beer is an 8.5% ABV barrel-aged Berliner Weiss. This beer was released for the Revolve event back in July. I was not able to attend this one-year anniversary party on Ellsworth Road, but my fellow Ann Arbor craft-loving friend Brett managed to snag a can for me. This beer comes in a can with a slick metallic green label. I personally really enjoy Mothfire's branding. It is so simple, yet so elegant, and of course, easily recognizable. So I poured this beer out into my Mothfire fancy glass. I don't even know what kind of a glass I would call this. The beer pours a straw to pale gold color. It has very little head on it, just a little bit of bubbles on the top. It's cloudy, you cannot see through it. So on the nose, getting a little bit of that jalapeno maybe, a little bit of maybe the gin, maybe a tad bit of that sweetness from the pineapple. Honestly, I think at this point what I really need to do is go in for a first sip impression and really get an idea of what this beer is going to give me. Yeah, this is nice. Immediately on the front, I get this almost overripe pineapple flavor. A little bit of sweetness there. Get a little bit of that jalapeno as it's passing over my tongue and going back to my throat. That lime zest adds just a nice little bit of crispness on the palate. And I think I'm even sensing a little bit of that ginger. Super complicated. So now that I've taken a first sip and I go back to the nose, I certainly am getting more of that pineapple aroma. It's really delicious. Super refreshing. So I can imagine if I had this beer on the spot back in July, it would have been exactly what I needed on a hot summer day. This is an 8.5% beer, so clearly it's not one that you would want to necessarily crush on, although I would say it sort of leans into that whole crushable idea. You know, it's got a light to medium-bodied mouthfeel on it. I was really excited that this was aged in gin barrels. For those that know me, I don't really do a whole lot of liquor. I might have a glass of bourbon at some point or some scotch, maybe some gin if it's good, but I just don't really go after that stuff very often. So when I saw this beer was aged in Mammoth Distilling gin barrels, I was pretty excited. Gin is one of those beverages that I don't mind drinking from time to time. One of my favorite gins is the woodland gin that comes from Iron Fish Distilling up in northern Michigan. I love that one. It's got a great botanical flavor to it, an aroma. It's just really what I like. So I was kind of expecting maybe a little bit of that botanical vibe here on the beer coming from the gin barrels. And really, the only thing that I can really sense personally is I get that little bit of boozy burn in the back of my throat as I'm drinking this. I don't sense anything necessarily that really screams gin to me, but I know that it certainly is aged in some sort of barrel, and if you hadn't told me it was gin, I may not have even known that. Not complaining though, believe me. I really like this beer. I think it's very complex. I think that it hits a lot of interesting notes, from the sweet pineapple to the little bit of spice that comes from the jalapeno, likely in the ginger as well. And you get that little bit of citrus zest in there that comes from the lime that just really leans into the gin underlying tones that are there. I also like the fact that this is a barrel-aged Berliner Weiss. I think that's pretty unusual, and I think takes a lot of guts to do something like this. I really like this beer. I think it really is as a solid one. It's exactly what I would expect from Mothfire, because they do such a great job with their beer. I give this one 4 tasters out of 5 on the flight board. Cheers, Mothfire, and thanks again, Brett. I am always looking for new craft beverages to review, so if you've got one from your favorite local craft brewery, meadery, or cidery you'd like me to drink and describe, reach out and let me know. That's all for this episode of the 5 Beer Plan. With so many podcasts out there, thanks for choosing to listen to mine. Join me next time as I start digging into my first yeast strain, turn up the heat on my homebrew project, interview Jeff from Loaded Dice Brewing, and review another beer. Remember to hit the subscribe button on your preferred podcast platform to be notified of new episodes. Follow me on Instagram as well, 5 Beer Plan 2022, to see what is happening on my personal ale trail. I'd love to hear from you, and there are several ways you may do so. Leave a comment for this episode on Spotify, direct message me on Instagram, or email me directly, 5beerplan@frontier.com. Be sure to support your local breweries, choose your beers wisely, and drink them responsibly. Until next time, keep walking your ale trail, and stay thirsty, my friends.